In every single one of our homes, there's this hidden giant. It works silently, 24/7, and honestly, we pretty much ignore it until the day it breaks down. I'm talking about your water heater. It might not look like much, but it is one of the single biggest energy hogs in your house. And its story? Well, it's this amazing puzzle of huge ambitions, public health scares, and some really cool new tech.
So just how big is this hidden giant? Well, take a look at this number. 20%. That is a huge chunk of all the energy delivered to homes in America, and it's used for just one thing: heating water. Think about that. That's more energy than your fridge, all your lights, and all your electronics combined.
When you add it all up, we're talking about 2.11 quadrillion BTUs of energy every single year. Now, I know that number is so big it's almost impossible to wrap your head around. So to put it in perspective, that's about the same amount of energy the entire country of Australia uses for electricity in a year. An enormous figure like that is exactly why water heating has been this major obsession for engineers and policymakers for over a century. Everyone's been trying to figure out how to tame this energy giant that's just humming away in all of our basements.
So where do you even start? How do you begin to tackle an energy problem on that kind of scale? Well, the very first big idea wasn't about making the little box in your house better. Nope, it was about getting rid of it completely and thinking on a massive, city-wide level.
And this brings us to a tale of two very different systems, starting with an idea called district heating. The concept was actually pretty simple and kind of brilliant. Instead of having thousands and thousands of individual, pretty inefficient heaters, why not heat entire cities from one central, super efficient source?
Now, what's so interesting here is that this wasn't some far-off, futuristic dream. As you can see from this old report from 1981, this idea was actually born right here in the US way back in the late 1800s.
Okay, so let's be totally clear on what we're talking about. District heating is basically like a utility, but for heat. You have a central plant that generates a ton of thermal energy, usually steam or hot water, and then it sends it out through this network of underground pipes to buildings all over a community.
And you know what? For a while, it totally worked. The first system fired up back in 1877, and by the early 1900s, electric companies had this light bulb moment. They realized all that steam they were using to generate electricity was just getting vented out into the air as waste. So they started piping that leftover steam to nearby buildings for heat. It's this brilliant two-for-one deal called cogeneration. But then technology changed. By the 1930s, we could send electricity over really long distances, so those small, in-town power plants that were providing the steam, well, they just vanished. Then came the 1950s, and with super cheap oil and natural gas, the dream of district heating in the US pretty much just faded away.
But here's the crazy twist. Just as the US was letting this amazing idea just wither and die, Europe picked it up and made it perfect. The really crucial difference came down to the technology. See, the US systems use steam, which is really hard to transport over long distances. That limited them to just dense downtown areas. Europe, on the other hand, started using hot water instead, which could travel much farther. That let them serve much larger areas. And today, most of those old US systems are falling apart, while in Europe, district heating is a huge success.
So that grand citywide solution, it kind of fizzled out here in America. The focus then shifted, moving from the city grid down to the building itself and the actual pipes running through our walls. And this wasn't just about being more efficient. It was a full-on revolution, driven by a life-or-death public health crisis.
Believe it or not, the flushing toilet was invented way back in 1596, but the real game changer was something called the S-trap, patented in 1775. It's that simple, clever little bend in the pipe under your sink. It holds a small amount of water that creates a physical seal, and that seal blocks foul and deadly sewer gases from coming back into your home. It was absolutely revolutionary. But it took devastating cholera outbreaks in the 1800s for people to take sanitation seriously. The big moment came in 1854, when Dr. John Snow proved that cholera was spreading through contaminated water by tracing an entire outbreak to a single public well. All of a sudden, proper plumbing was a luxury anymore. It was a matter of survival.
And that brings us to a really surprising fact about today. Even with all of our modern technology, the basic rules and codes that govern the pipes inside our walls are still based on practices and assumptions that were developed over half a century ago. We are literally living with the legacy of that plumbing revolution.
Okay, so let's fast forward to right now. We've pretty much solved those big public health problems. Thank goodness. But what we're left with is this modern puzzle of massive waste and inefficiency that actually starts long before the water even gets to your water heater.
Realizing this, groups like the Department of Energy are now taking a really systematic look at the entire system, from the pipes to the faucet and everything in between. The goal is to hunt down all those hidden inefficiencies, all the gaps in what we know, and come up with solutions that actually work in the real world.
And once you start looking closely, you realize this puzzle has a lot of pieces. Researchers are zeroing in on these key gaps. For one, we need to know how these new, super-efficient systems actually perform in a real home, not just in some pristine lab. We also, weirdly, don't have great data on our own habits, like how much hot water do we really use and when do we use it? And crucially, we need to figure out how much energy the pipes in our walls are wasting before that hot water even gets to us.
So here's the kicker. We are testing and rating water heaters based on assumptions that just don't match up with reality. The official government tests assume an average family uses about 64 gallons of hot water a day, but the data from real homes shows that for a lot of us, the actual number is much, much lower. This huge disconnect means that a heater that looks amazing on paper might be totally wrong for your actual home.
So what's the solution to this puzzle? Well, that brings us to the final piece, the next generation of technology. It's designed to be smarter, way more efficient, and just better suited to how we actually live our lives. And the star of this show is the Heat Pump Water Heater, or HPWH for short. Now, this thing is incredibly clever. Instead of using electricity to create heat, like a toaster element, it works just like your refrigerator, but in reverse. It literally grabs existing heat out of the air around it and pumps that heat into the water tank. It's a heat mover, not a heat maker. And when you look at the numbers, the results are just stunning. A normal electric water heater is maybe 90 to 95% efficient. But because a heat pump moves heat instead of creating it, its efficiency is over 200%, sometimes even 300%. What that means is it can cut your water heating energy use by 50% or even more. It is an absolute game changer. But, and this is the key to this whole story, that incredible performance isn't a guarantee. As the researchers point out, the real-world efficiency of these advanced heaters is massively affected by everything from the climate where you live to your family's shower schedule. You can't just drop in a new appliance and expect magic to happen. You have to think about the whole system.
So this all leaves us with one final, really important question. For more than a century, we've tried to solve this hot water puzzle with giant city grids and then with slightly better boxes in our basements. But what if the next great leap forward isn't just about a more efficient appliance? What if it's about creating a truly smarter, more integrated system, one that actually understands our homes, understands our habits, and finally tames that hidden energy giant for good?